So first about me and XWiki, what we're trying to do, and what our story. And so I will try to focus mostly on our story. So me, I've been running XWiki 12 years. I'm passionate about open source, about technical innovation. I think that the world needs a bit more sharing, and that when you do something, it shouldn't be all about just making money. And that what's interesting is also to leave something behind. And XWiki is a collaborative platform. We're in a quite competitive market. I mean, we have in the collaboration, it's going to be Microsoft and companies like that. So it's not an easy market. We're an innovative company. When we started doing wikis, it was not that much known, and we had a solution quite early, and it was directly open source. We're LGPL licensed. It's 100% open source, but not necessarily everything's free. I'll get back to that. And we're a company that does 2 million revenue. So our objective is we want to create open source. We want to have a competitive solution on the market, and we want to be a healthy business, and we want to be sustainable in the long term. Now, when you look at the issue with investors, is that, well, when there is cash invested, the investors will want to get something out of the cash. And the problem is that the out is a lot out. So they want a multiplier. And that means that investors at some point will want more control on the monetization, and they will push for maximization of revenue at some point because they don't care about the goal of the company. They care about their money. And they will, and from my point of view, they pushed for closing more and more. And so at some point, the money versus the community becomes an issue, and you need a balance between the two, and the investors are an issue in this direction. And so you have some good example with MySQL. At some point, well, let's sell it and now it's up, taken by Oracle, and at some point, strategy changes and objective changes, and that creates forks and many other issues. Now, the fully open source issue, I say with no capital also, is that when you're doing everything, if you're very, very open source, doing everything for open source, well, the thing is, users tend to want everything for free, and they confuse open source and free. And so you're in competition with business models that are working in a different way. So they have a freemium model with VC funded, and at some point there will be an objective to cash out the thing. So you can be competing with models where initially they're losing a lot of money, and you cannot lose money because you don't have VC funding. So that's an issue. And so you're competing with people that are ready to lose money for quite some time, and that's not so easy. So you get also the prisoner's dilemma for customers when something can be free, should they pay for it? If I can get it for free, what should I do? So there is a complexity there that is not always easy to handle. And so if you look at the service business model, which is one of the business models that can be applied, is that there is a scale issue. If you want to scale, service is difficult, takes more time to scale, and it's not something simple. And the product needs to stay competitive, so you need to continue to invest in R&D, and so the service doesn't directly pay for R&D, so your margin needs to be more important than the traditional service business model if you want to fund the R&D. So in the end, one key issue is that the open source development needs to be funded. I mean, you need to pay your employees. You don't, as it was said many times, like most people contributing to open source are paid. Some people are doing it for free when they use the software, but if you look at particularly a good example is if you're a user of an end user software, a B2C software, then yes, maybe you can spend some time to improve it. But if you're a user of an enterprise software, well, if you're employed by a company, yes, maybe you can contribute some things, but that doesn't happen that much. So you have less inclined people to contribute to an enterprise software, and so you need to find ways to pay for it. So now, with this as a basis, what happened, and what did we learn from our journey? So the first thing is the first 2 years when XWiki started, 2003, 2004, I coded. I was alone. I coded XWiki. I launched free wikis on xwiki.com. I created the company. I had no revenue, no leads. And the first interest of people looking at XWiki was the fact that it was innovative. And so lesson I learned from that is that first, well, you don't make revenue. You will need to find ways to make revenue. Second lesson is that, well, you need a product and one that interests user. Innovation is one way to get some interest, some initial interest from people on your software. Now, the next 2 years, coded again. So, and I will get back to that. We coded all the time. So you need to continue coding all the time. So that's something you do all the time. But, so I won't focus that much. So we were mostly on the infrastructure module, and we had some first clients on custom work. And the work was not necessarily strongly related to XWiki. So it was people, I need something, okay, maybe we can do it, and let's use XWiki to do it. But we could have used anything else. Maybe there were a better solution than using XWiki, but it allowed us to build modules and infrastructure module in XWiki. And at some point, we ended up doing around 250K revenue at the end of these 2 years. So 250K of revenue, mostly on service, but mostly some stuff that is not that much related, a bit in the collaborative area, but not necessarily fully. So service is a good way to finance the product. That helped us create modules. In the next 2 years, we actually continued coding, user interface. We did more user interface, more backend. And we started to do our first research project. And I'd like to thank Stefan for that, because he brought us in the world of research project. And that has actually been a really important thing for XWiki, because it brought us a lot of funding over time. We did also the first support sales. We put a bit of money because we started to have cash flow issues. So when you're growing, there is a cash flow issue. We had some first fails in the sense that we tried to do some partnerships. We tried also to do some semi-vertical products like XWiki for this, XWiki for that. But in the end, one lesson was that we did too many things at the same time, and it was difficult. So one lesson is not doing too many things. And so research project and CIR in France is a great way to finance product work, and it has been tremendous for XWiki. Next 2 years, actually what was interesting is that we had the crisis in 2008, and it was quite tough. So we had a first moment where it was not going so well. Well, the good thing in technology company is that when things are not going so well in a company, people start to leave by themselves. So that's actually a good thing. So we didn't have that many difficulties. So some people left, and we got back to a balance, and it was okay. But one good thing the biggest thing that helped us was actually international. French clients reduced a lot buying things, but actually the contacts we had internationally started to we'll do something. So we had some international projects, and we started to have a bigger amount of international sales, and that hasn't stopped since then. We also went back to the core product, so we removed a bit doing XWiki for this, XWiki for that, trying to refocus on the main product. We reached about 1 million revenue at that time. And so another thing, international is a great way to finance a product, especially for an open source company. Open source companies are international by nature. You're putting your stuff on the software online, and it comes from everywhere. Today, we see that we have about 30% visits from China. We have no idea how to do business there, but I mean, we have people interested in XWiki in China. So you at some point you need to think about what you can do internationally. From next 2 years, continue to improve XWiki. Actually, yeah. So we added new WYSIWYG, rendering, REST Office integration. So the product evolved and got more features. In the next 2 years, we actually started working more. We added app within minute to build applications, and an extension repository, so an app store inside XWiki. So we have an app store system to add extensions. We had a fail with our first cloud offering. One of the reasons of failing is that we had a discrepancy with what we did on cloud and what we had in our product. Actually, technically there was something that wasn't working, and so one lesson is that we need our cloud offering to be the same one so open source on the cloud. That's a big lesson in the end, because you need a transition from people trying open source to buying cloud. And so you need a way to say, oh, choose cloud, open source, on-premise, just choose. That's a big advantage of open source company. They can let people choose. And people like choice. They will choose something, you don't know what, but they like the idea that initially when they discuss with you, they don't have to make that choice now. And they can also change that choice over time. That's an important aspect, and we have some customers that we have because they had this possibility. They started with a simple wiki on the cloud, and then they grew it, and then and they know that they can take it back in their system later. We did larger projects, and we started doing support sales. So basically, getting a recurrent revenue from clients, and that was a big thing. And we started also European research projects, which is actually even better than French research project when it comes to funding. It's more complicated. It requires working with other countries, but it's actually also nice to work with other countries. So, but I would tell people, go ahead and try to do research projects and European research projects. We achieved about 1.5 million revenue there. One thing we learned is the cloud is competitive, and we need to link it to the open source product. So cloud is complex and not so simple. Next 2 years, we did more growth, and our problems were about growing. So internal. So how do we handle growth? How do we hire and things like that? We did more service sales. We took over some clients from an ex-partner. We did more measurement. So actually that's something I also encourage people to do, is measure, especially in marketing. So trying to understand what people like in your product, what they don't like. Maybe we took a bit too much time to do that, like more information about what is being used and what is not being used. In open source, people tend also to have this, we're tracking user. Is it good to track user? Well, yeah, if it helps you make the product better, it's good for the users. It's about the ethics of how you use the data. If you have limits, it is about how you use the data. You don't give it away, you don't sell it, things like that. But it's good to get information and get consent of the user to get it. We did applications, we went responsive, we reached 2 million revenue. So one thing we learned is that service sales are tough to grow because it takes time. When you get a big project, you're busy on the project and you don't have much time to resell new ones. So what we tried to do is in 2015, 2016, we tried to give a push on the product side. And so one good thing happened is that we did some roadmap financing. Actually, so we did that in the past too. Some people buying features in the roadmap. So buying a feature that we add to the product. But actually it was done at a huge scale in 2015. It's a very large company that decided to deploy XWiki globally for more than 100,000 people. Decided actually they need a very important feature, and they paid us 150,000 euros to do that feature. And that was almost the whole development cycle of the year. So basically, and at that point, what happened for this year is that in that year, between the roadmap financing and the research project and the CEF funding, basically the R&D was almost break even. So it didn't cost anything to the company. What was actually becoming costly is marketing, like the difficulty to invest in marketing. But R&D became almost break even. So now one thing is that you can sell roadmap, it works, but it's not easy to repeat. You know, it's going to be one shot with one client. Next year, they have no reason to buy something. So they're going to buy it 1 year, but not the next year. So it's difficult to repeat roadmap financing. But definitely it's something to try to do because it is highly beneficial. You need to try to do that without forgetting your priorities in terms of product. What we tried to do, and we failed, is we tried to do a package over XWiki that was the company package. So a subscription. And what we found out is that this was not good for a company our size. This might be okay for a very large, a company with a lot of funding, able to do a lot of marketing work and explain to people you have this or you have this, etc. But for us, it was not good. it was difficult to explain. It was confusing for people. What is, you're doing XWiki, you're doing XES, what's the difference? There was not big difference, but it was difficult to understand. So what we realized that this was not a good solution for our case. And I like one thing I heard this morning is that in terms of business model in open source, if you try something and it doesn't work, try something else. And actually, this is very true, is that you need to try to find out what works for you, what works for your company. And in this case, we found out that at least for now, it's not the right approach for us. It created some confusion. And that actually also reduced leads, because at some point, we removed downloads from the commercial website. So people were not downloading XWiki from the commercial website. And that reduced our leads. So now we got it back, and now we're getting big leads from that. And so one thing is that, and this is more over time, one thing I regret over the time is I should have tried to find ways to invest more in marketing. So at some moments, decide, okay, we need more people on the marketing side. And this is actually a bias also from the funding of research. You get a lot of funding for the technology, but you don't get funding for marketing, and you tend to reduce, to not have enough marketing. And so we need to get more known and get. There is a lot of things to put in place on the sales, on the marketing. There's like campaigns, emailing to people to remind them what you can do for them. One thing also I realized is that people don't know that you can do services for them, and they just forget about you. And so you need to repeat it constantly and constantly reach out to potential customers or people that installed XWiki, that you can help them, and it will be more efficient if they work with you than if they do it themselves. And because that's what it actually is. So that's one of the good things of the business model, is that if a company reaches out to specialists, it will be cheaper in the end than if they do it themselves. Lesson is that to making users pay for features is interesting, but it's hard to repeat. And the paying offering needs to be in continuity of the open source offering. So you really need, from my point of view, you need to have a good continuity from free open source to paying, and eventually proprietary if you decide that some of your code should be proprietary. But so that it needs to be a continuity that is easy for people to move from one to the other. And we didn't have that with XES, and we decided to stop. And the sales and marketing. So now what are we trying to do? So taking from this lesson of the package, of the company package, we're looking at paying modules, and we're looking at verticals. So there's two things we're going to look at, is specific paying modules, technical ones, saying, okay, still open source. So if specialists want them as open source, they can get them, but they won't get it free like that. So from the point of view of the company, it's going to be provided as something that you can pay for. So cloud also will be part of that. But the most important part is that in our case, in the type of product that we do, we realize that what we need is to try to be more focused to the usage of the people. So we realize we have a nice generic platform, but that people have a hard time projecting their use case inside that platform. And so we need to go deeper, talking to a specific business. So getting back a bit to what we had done a long time ago, try XWiki for this, XWiki for that, but less technical actually, because even what we did in the past was too technical. So we're more thinking about XWiki for sales, XWiki for HR, XWiki for IT, and these packages, which are merely a reorganization of what already exists. So it's not actual huge code; it's more a configuration of your XWiki instance. These packages will be paying packages. That's what we plan to do. And having also a model around extensions. So in the App Store, where you can have free stuff and paying stuff. In our cloud, providing this directly. Providing these verticals directly. We think that to go further the product way, we need to go in the usage orientation, basically. Because, and one of the reasons of this is the competition with cloud. The SaaS services there is a huge amount of vertical cloud offerings on the market, and so as a generic platform, if you don't have something kind of ready to go, more and more you get competition from verticals, from SaaS services for a specific business. So we need to have something more ready for a specific use case, for a specific business. So these slides, I had them as a reminder. So more when people get the presentation online, it's a bit all the lessons that we had over time. Now there is one item to finish. Is now what can the community do around open source product? So one thing that the community needs to do is make a difference between proprietary cloud or open source cloud. I mean, right now, users don't understand how locked in they will be to proprietary clouds, and they don't yet understand that, and they only see the price. They only see the price. They don't see the future price. They don't see the fact that they are locking in a model in a relationship with them. And the fact, and they don't see also the freemium models, the fake freemium models, like the freemium models funded by VC that will change later. So it's really hard for customers to understand that they might be going into something that might disappear or might significantly change in terms of pricing. And this is something they wouldn't get with open source, but they don't see it. They will think the same, that you're the same, everybody is the same, and it might happen. And so as a customer, we had the case of a cloud service that stopped and was taken over by a company, and they told us, well, you have 1 month to switch to our new offering, 50% more expensive, and plus you need to spend a lot of time to reconfigure everything you've done in the past, and it disappeared. And so you have high risks of high risk of the service disappearing, or just the offer change. No free offer anymore. You have to pay or go away. And that is an issue with the models that we have today. And when users buy service on open source software, they need to look also at who does the R&D. So a second difficulty that people have, that companies like us have, is that you get in competition with service company using open source software, not contributing to them, and not having any R&D in their business. And that customers need to know it. They need to have the information. So there is a lot of education to do on the market to explain that there is a difference between an offering that contributes to R&D and an offering that doesn't contribute to R&D. You don't agree, Cedric? It's thinking about. So to give an example, in our business, from time to time, we come on public websites. So we're doing public websites. And so what is the public website business? It's web agencies working with interns and making websites very quickly with open source software. And that's great for open source. Open source will be everywhere. It will be deployed, but doesn't help that much the R&D. And these services the cost is brought down thanks to both the usage of open source and the usage of interns. And we have high-level engineers, no interns, and we play by the good rules of what a good business should be. Well, our cost cannot be the cost of a business that is running with interns. So it's tough to compete when you're in this case.
Last slide.
I'm closing up. It's the last slide. It is the last slide.
Excellent.
So we would need to see service companies contributing more to open source software that they use. And actually, this is also true for cloud companies using massive amounts of open source software in their cloud service and not necessarily contributing at all to them. And so there should be some sort of measurement of contribution to the open source software that is being used. Maybe that's one thing that the OW2 could do, and open source associations to do in general, is measure the contribution that any software, any cloud company is doing, and say, okay, show us and in proportion of your business, because of course Microsoft today is a big open source contributor, but in proportion of their business, they're probably still a very small one. And so one other thing is that community in general needs to consider the need for the contributors to finance their work. So it is not wanting everything for free. When you're in front of an open source business, it is actually painful to have people thinking that you should do everything for free. No, you shouldn't do everything for free. If the open source software is there, it's already a big giveaway that is there, and people can benefit from it. Crowdfunding is also a way potentially to help fund more R&D, and that could be interesting.
Thank you, Ludovic.